Everyone who's just joining us this evening, if not been with us before, please do support us, share us, like us. We're on Facebook and on YouTube. We have some guests with us this evening, which will include Howie Silberger, who started a group called Save All Jews Everywhere, which was disbanded due to pressure from woke organizations. He might mention that in his little talk this evening. Today, he's the host of the Howie Silberger Show on Talk Radio, and you can listen to Howie's rant on YouTube. Political hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. And in his spare time, Howie's a secular studies principal of Yeshiva Gedolah, elementary division and high school division. He's the coordinator. Also joining this evening, a little later in the show, will be Moshe Hill. Moise is a political columnist, and senior fellow. Get those words confused sometimes. He has a weekly column in the Queen's, as well as Daily Wire, Washington Examiner, among others. And particularly pertinent discussions is a tool of the left, which just was published, which you can in Vin News or online. And do follow him at Hill with a View. And joining us this evening is going to be Jesse Edberg, who's a spokesman for the Religious Zionist Party Youth. He's currently studying political science at Tulane University and plans to make Aliyah after his graduation. It's his first time with us, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say. So moving on along, we're going to talk a little bit about tonight's topics, which will include the week in review. And a lot of stuff has happened this week. We're going to be discussing the rise and subsequent fall of the Anti-Defamation League. And I'm going to give a little background to Whoopi Goldberg's true colors. Goldberg was born Karen. There's a Karen for you, Elaine Johnson. Her mother was a nurse. Her father was a Baptist pastor. Apparently, from what I could gather, her mother was quite an astonishing woman. She was a teacher. She was a nurse. She was involved in the Head Start programs. I have a question about this whole Karen thing. I don't really get it. What is all this stuff about Karens? Here's a whole bunch of Karens. Why are we picking on them just because their name is Karen? I don't get it. Getting back to Whoopi, regarding the name Whoopi, according to Deborah Solomon, New York Times, Goldberg stated proudly that people used to say to me, "You're like a whoopee cushion." And that's where the name came from. What a surprise. There she is on her advertisement. 25 cents by mail in 1930. And of course, the people from Toronto have something to be very proud of. Whoopee cushion was actually invented in Toronto in 1930. Sorry, couldn't resist. Among the many contributions made by the proud citizens of Toronto. And how about the shtick about the Goldberg thing? According to the Jewish Chronicle, Goldberg states unequivocally, as a child, her name was Goldberg. It's part of her family, part of my heritage, and it's just like being black. Well, it's not just like being black, because she really is black. And here she is as a child.
I am Whoopi Goldberg. I am comedian, author, actress, and TV personality.
Pretty impressive child. And we have some family pictures of her. Here's Whoopi Goldberg with her grandpa, Rube Goldberg. Everybody knows who Rube Goldberg is, the inventor. There she is. You can see her right in that little picture, smiling away. And here she is in the Mighty Ducks. There's Goldberg. Go Goldberg, go Goldberg. On a more serious note, the only problem is that according to Henry Louis Gates Jr., a historian of African American research at Harvard, Goldberg's ancestors were African Americans. She has no known German or Jewish ancestry, and none of her ancestors were named Goldberg. So basically, I guess she's caught kind of being not quite so truthful. According to a 2006 PBS documentary based on her DNA sampling, her ancestors were the Papal Biot people of modern-day Guinea-Bissau, and she's 92% sub-Saharan African. So if you look back at pictures of this particular group and tribe, these are them. And I'm not sure why she's not proud of her African heritage, particularly with this whole Black Lives Matter movement. And there she is with her people, so she would say, although that's most likely not really Whoopi's grandmother. And recently divulges a contribution to a cookbook. It's the Jewish American Princess Fried Chicken. And based on it, I won't read the entire recipe right now, but what it does is the typical anti-Semitic tropes that Jews are all rich, cheap, spoiled, lazy, and vain. So I don't understand why people get away with this when it's about Jews, but any other group, you'd never get away with this. For example, why are mean-spirited anti-Semitic tropes which offend, insult, and demean Jews fair game? While insulting, demeaning, stereotyping, targeting other groups are taboo and offend all of us. I'll give an example of something I would never do because it would be taboo and I would be criticized for it. I would never say that Whoopi Goldberg isn't actually overweight. That's not the problem. The problem is that she's suffering from a malignant water melanoma. I would get in big trouble if I said that, because it brings up tropes and stereotypes which we know to be false. And this is not something which would be funny unless if it was, of course, was involving Jews. Water melanoma, get it? She got herself in big trouble when she decided that the Holocaust was not about racism. She obviously didn't do her homework. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. And here at israelnow.ca and Never Again podcast, we don't do nothing. We try our best to inform, educate, and fight anti-Semitism. So without any further ado, please support Israel Now CA. And here's Meir with the Parsha of the week.
Good evening, everyone. Just going to ask everyone who's watching, who's watching on Facebook, on YouTube, if you could please share this on your various social media pages that you're part of. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you use. Please share this. We'll reach a lot more people. Also, if you have any questions, we have an active chat. You could join the chat. You can post your question or concern, and we'll do our best to address it as well. Before I start with the Parsha, and every single episode we talk about the Parsha as it leads into the show. But I just want to make mention of Esther Pollard, who just passed away this week. And it's very sad for the Jewish people. She devoted her life, her adult life, to advocating for Jonathan Pollard's freedom. And together, just over a year ago, they moved to Israel. They settled in Israel. And just this week, Esther Pollard passed away. So the Jewish nation is sad. And she was a great example of commitment to the Jewish ideal. And Jonathan Pollard put himself at great risk to help Israel. And that's what we're trying to do as much as we can. That's our obligation today, to help Israel, to help the Jewish people to the best of our abilities, over and beyond. This week's Parsha is called Truma, Parsha's Truma. And there's been a lot going on this past week in terms of anti-Semitism. There was a report from Amnesty International saying Israel has no right to exist since its founding. An illegal state. The whole words it's word for word from the BDS, which calls for the elimination of the Jewish state. It's almost as if they're agents of Iran to destroy Israel, to give the justification for the destruction of the Jewish state. And in this week's Parsha, Truma, it just starts off, and God spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and have them take for me a Truma offering. From every man whose heart impels him to give generously, shall you take my Truma offering." Now it goes on and on and on, this Parsha about different offerings, how much to give, and what was the Truma? What was the purpose of this? This is something that Amnesty International doesn't want Jews to read. They'd like this chapter to be ripped out of the Torah, because this chapter talks about the obligation of the Jewish people to contribute, everyone, to the building of the Mishkan and ultimately the temple, the Beis Hamikdash. And where is the Beis Hamikdash to be built? On Har Bayit, Temple Mount. This is what it's about. And Amnesty International says Jews have no right to live in the land of Israel, build in Jerusalem. They have no right, according to Amnesty International, according to the anti-Semites there. So it's been quite the week with Whoopi Goldberg talking about the Holocaust, horrible comments that she made when she says the Holocaust was not about race. I'm Jewish, parents, survivors of the Holocaust. I know what it meant to be Jewish when I was growing up. There was anti-Semitism. I experienced it. My friends experienced it. People knew who was Jewish back then. People knew when I was growing up. And where are you from? What's your nationality? So we went through a lot. When she says the Holocaust was about whites fighting whites, what is she, crazy? And she's given a platform on national TV. So she's been giving time off for 2 weeks to rethink her position. She should be fired. Actually, the show, The View, should be canceled, period, because those people who are with her on The View, that take an idle stance and do nothing and don't speak out, shame on them, and that show should be canceled. That's woke anti-Semitism at its finest, and it's rampant. And there's segments within the Jewish community that legitimize, in fact, that woke anti-Semitism, that Jews are white. And we have a number of guests on the show tonight. We have Moish Hill, who he wrote an article on the Anti-Defamation League that they actually were promoting a new idea, a woke idea of what racism is. And when he exposed them, their nonsense, they quickly scrubbed their site and redid the definition, because their definition of racism actually played into exactly what Whoopi Goldberg was saying. And by the way, as we said in the introduction, that's not her name, Goldberg. She took that name. Her name is Johnson. That's her real last name. She adopted that name because her mother said, Jews are successful. Take a Jewish name. Take a Jewish name and defame the Holocaust. Unbelievable. Let's have Moise Hill join us and talk about the ADL and the damage that they have been doing in the Jewish community with this lack of leadership. Moise, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So give us the background. What happened? You wrote the article about the ADL. You exposed their definition of racism, and then all of a sudden they started scrubbing their sites and redoing it so they're not caught. What happened?
Yes, I wish I could take 100% of the credit. I will take my portion of the credit, but it did become a big deal after they hired a director of Jewish outreach, Tema Smith, who has a history of saying anti-Jewish things, or basically allowing or understanding the terrorism against Israelis by the Palestinian Authority and by Hamas, and which is usually not a great look for someone who's tried to outreach to the Jewish community. And then it became clear that the ADL on their own site redefined racism on their website in June 2020, which, if everyone in America remembers, was the time of the George Floyd riots, the Black Lives Matter riots, and they redefined racism from a standard definition, I'm paraphrasing, of racism is when you believe that another race is either inferior or you believe your race is superior, so a standard definition, to essentially, once again paraphrasing, racism is when white people oppress people of color, which is a outrageous definition by any stretch of the imagination. It became really became a viral that the ADL did this, and it was around for a year and a half before anyone noticed. So I wrote about it. I wrote about Tema Smith. I wrote about the ADL change of definition. I believe Ben Shapiro, very famous commentator, spoke about the ADL's definition, change of definition right around the time I was talking about it, and that kind of pressure had prompted them to change the definition back to a more normal and understandable definition of racism, which is a good thing. You need to put people's feet to the fire. Just because the ADL has been on the downward slide for decades at this point doesn't mean that they aren't a useful organization or don't still have some good things that they could possibly do in the future. They just their organization's over 100 years old, and I think that they could be good for the Jewish community, but right now they're not being good for the Jewish community.
You know, when you mentioned Tema Smith that was hired by the ADL, I did a little bit of research on Twitter, and If Not Now, which is used by PBS American for worse or worse, for
one of the egregious Israel organizations. Yes.
Right, and they're cheering for Tema Smith.
Yes,
I think that says a lot.
It says everything. If Not Now would like nothing better than to see the complete destruction of the state of Israel, whether they know it or not. If the state of Israel goes, so do the 7 million plus Jews who live in the state of Israel. And because as opposed to what people believe, Israel is not an apartheid state. The actual apartheid state areas in that region exist in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria and the Palestinian territory areas. If a Jew walks in there, if any Jew even steps foot, they are in immediate danger. There are big signs that say, before you enter that area, you cannot. If you go in here, your life is forfeit. You can be killed because you are a Jew. And imagine if they get their wish and all of that area is from the river to the sea. It'll be another Holocaust immediately. Right. And the ADL will not be a useful organization as long as people like Tema Smith or CEO Jonathan Greenblatt are still at the helm. They need to do a massive course correction immediately. Jonathan Greenblatt was just re-signed to another 5-year contract, I believe, in 2020. So he's there till 2025 at least. And so maybe they'll change course. I doubt it. I don't think they will. But there is, listen, we need good organizations. They're just not one of them.
So also, so when the report came out this week from Amnesty International, very vicious report. In fact, the foreign minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, he called it anti-Semitic. He said in most cases, he's very reluctant to use that term, but not now, but it applies. And the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, he was ready to designate Amnesty International and a couple of other organizations as anti-Semitic organizations. But the Anti-Defamation League went to bat for Amnesty International. Isn't that
here's the thing about all these organizations: Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and I'm not talking about the ones that were created with the destruction of the state of Israel in mind.
Right.
Now, these organizations were just organizations that were basically taken over by the left. And that's because people of the left have institutional mentalities. Their institutional mentalities say, where I work, where I exist, must reflect my politics. They must reflect my worldview. Whereas people on the right very rarely have that kind of mentality. So when they become, for example, a school teacher in a school, whatever the school does, they do. Whatever I say, I do, and that's it. Whereas someone on the left wants the entire school to be like them. Same thing with these organizations. So Amnesty International is filled with these people. Human Rights Watch is filled with these people. The ADL is filled with these people. And they will all come to the same conclusion. The conclusion is Israel is high, Palestinians is low. That must be because Israel is the oppressor. The Palestinians are the victims. So that's it. That's our conclusion. It's simplistic and it's ridiculous. And frankly, it's incredibly ignorant. And I have some harsher words, but I wonder how clean your show is. It's a family-friendly show.
Right. We have a student who's joining us as well, Jesse Edberg. And he sees on campus what's going on with, if not now, J Street, and all these groups that so-called Jews, we don't know if they are because there's such a high rate of intermarriage also. We don't know really who is nowadays, but they claim to be Jewish, and they're working on behalf of the BDS to work for the elimination of Israel. Jesse, how are you doing?
I'm good. So what I'm seeing on campus is primarily 3 groups. Yep. So aligned with Frantz Fanon's view of a post-colonial society, you have the colonizers, the colonized, which is the Jewish people that we've been mistreated for 2,000 years. You have the colonizers, which is all the nations that have mistreated us, which at this point is almost every nation across the world. And then you have a tricky third class, which Fanon calls the colonized bourgeoisie, and what Gadi Taub calls the mobile class. And they're Jews, but they're kind of Stockholm Syndrome affiliated with the people that have colonized us. So on some level, and I've been thinking about this, on some level, they're justified in a way. Because Russell Kirk writes this in The Conservative Mind, that when you have a group that's in a place where they're not supposed to be, like Jews outside of Eretz Israel, there's going to be animosity that builds up. So it's understandable that they have animosity towards the establishment and the underpinnings of our civilization in the West. And from a certain point of view, they're even justified that Christian dominance over the world is something that's not natural. It's something that should be opposed, because really it should be Jewish cultural dominance. That's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be Or Lagoyim, not the Christians. So in a way, they're even justified in opposing that. But the way that they err and the way that they go wrong is they have this such a raw anger. And because of the lack of Jewish education, it's not pointed in the right direction. And you have these groups like If Not Now, like J Street, like BDS, all of it, like Jewish Voices for Peace, all of these kind of astroturf, mobile class, colonized bourgeoisie groups that are acting on behalf. They're Jews, maybe some more, some less. They're Jews, but they're acting as an arm of the colonized wing, of the West, of the Arabs, whoever it might be, to divert justified Jewish anger back until it's friendly fire against our own people. And it's really up to us, the Jews that have emunah, the Jews that have this internal affiliation with our people that's not going to be broken because we've had that education, because we had that upbringing. It's up for us to save these people, to bring them back into our camp so that we can have one Jewish people again.
So how active are you seeing them on campus?
So the issue right now at Tulane University is that J Street just started.
Yep.
There was an issue where they were trying to break in with the Hillel. The Hillel does a club fair for Jewish clubs. J Street said, "We're a Jewish club. Let's join." And Hillel said, "Yeah, you're a Jewish club. We do stuff for Jewish clubs. Okay with me." The students here are so great. They're so special. All of the other clubs, all the other Jewish clubs, every single one said, "We are going to boycott this club fair. We are going to go to Chabad and we're going to have our club fair there. You're going to have a club fair, and the only club you're going to have is J Street. And you're going to look absolutely ridiculous unless you bar J Street from coming." And Hillel wasn't about it. They weren't about it until the pressure mounted and they folded. They folded under the pressure of these students. And something really to be proud of. You know, there's a lot of pessimism to Jewry, especially in the diaspora, and it is justified. But the bright spots really should be focused on, and this is one of them.
So let me ask you. So you mentioned, that what you think is the reason why J Street U and If Not Now are gravitating towards BDS, and that's assuming that they're Jewish. Because in some of the states in the United States, the intermarriage rate could be as high as 70%. J Street, as an organization, on their website, they say that, I think they say 80% of their membership are Jews who are intermarried. So I would assume, think correctly, that the offspring of the older adults that are part of J Street, that when they say they're intermarried, that the kids are, I don't know if I could say all of them or 75% of them or 50% of them, but a significant percent are not Jewish. If the mother is not Jewish, the offspring are not Jewish. That's basic Jewish law. If they're from such a relationship and they're banner holders for J Street, which doesn't have a good position on Israel at all, and you have, let's say, one of the parents that says, "And I'm a proud Jew," and the other parent, "I'm a proud Catholic, I'm a proud whatever," but there's a conflict in the household in terms of what the identity is anyways. And so when they're on campus and you may have some proud Jews that are advocating, that came from Israel to advocate about what a definition of a Jewish state is, or you have some students, or you have a rabbi from a Chabad house that gives a definition, a basic definition of what a Jewish state is. That definition itself is completely opposite to the definition that that kid is raised in his home from parents who go to J Street, that one is Catholic and one is Jewish, or one doesn't believe in anything. But I mean, if the mother's not Jewish, then the kids are not Jewish. And then the father is saying, I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, you're Jewish. You're Jewish. And then they then get active on campus through these organizations, if not now J Street U. And therefore the justification for, in my view, for being very involved in the BDS is because it's almost like a necessary thing to do, because it's a fight against that definition of being a Jew. And in the woke culture, nationalism is the enemy, and therefore Jewish identity attached to Israel, nationalism, Jewish nationalism, is the enemy. What do you have to say about that, Jesse?
So it's very interesting that you say that. I'll tell a quick story. I was sitting in the Hillel the other day doing homework. I had my headphones on, but I wasn't listening to any music. I just wanted a little bit of a sound deprivation. And there were 4 girls sitting about 10 feet away from me. Or there are 3 girls, 1 girl walks by and says, I hear you're talking about gender non-binary in Judaism, and I did a project about that. And I know this girl, and she happens to be not Jewish, but she's interested in Judaism to some degree, but she is not Jewish. And they're talking about, it's like, oh yeah, non-binary gender identity in Judaism and all of this kind of thing. And then so 4 girls right now, one of them I know is not Jewish. And then one of them goes, yeah, don't go to Chabad. They're so not accepting, because my mom converted through reform and they never really accepted her, and they don't count her in a minion or whatever. So now I know that out of these 4, 2 of them are not Jewish, talking about non-binary gender identity in Judaism, which is not a thing at all, trying to plan an event for the Hillel to educate Jews on this fictional imported concept from the West, imported into Judaism. So no matter how you cut it, whether the other 2 were Jews or they weren't Jews as well, you have a situation where the colonizers, the West, the Arabs, whoever it might be, in this case the West, are collaborating with some Jews that are kind of Stockholm Syndrome, mentally captive of these people, to try and affect the greater Jewish community. And it's something that definitely should be resisted, both on a physical level, in terms of them trying to split up Eretz Yisrael, create two dependent states for them to control, which is the same thing they've been trying to do since 1921 with the Sharifian solution, to metaphysical colonization, trying to import their ideas into our dot, into our way of life. And it's something that has to be resisted, as Rav Kook says, with holiness and with might.
Okay. Moish, what can you add, Moish, to this whole thing? If not now, it's a new phenomenon going on. It's
it's
are they Jewish?
it's a fun
Are
time.
they not Jewish? Like, where are they coming from?
I definitely went to college too soon, because it was. I'm sure it's a laugh and a half on campuses these days with these groups. It is absolutely ridiculous that these groups get away with the idea that they are the true Jews. Some would call. I love to say, just because you like bagels doesn't mean you're a Jew. The Judaism is far more than a religion. It is a nationality. It is the Jewish nation. I've written extensively about this. I wrote for the Daily Wire.
Goldman says she's Jewish.
Exactly. Like there was actually a few years back, President Trump in 2018 signed an executive order declaring that Jewish people are protected under the Civil Rights Act because it's not just a religion; it is a nationality. He was called an
Right.
anti-Semite for that. Was 100% right. And the
100%,
thing that
yes.
the leftist groups abhor, like you said, Jesse, abhor about Judaism is the fact that we have a nation, is the fact that the nation of Judaism, it has a common religion, it has a common ancestral home, it has a common language, and they abhor all aspects of that. And because their religion is not a Jewish religion, their religion is leftism. Their religion is the ideas and of the woke and the ideas of the progressive movement. And that is why when it comes to a conflict between the Jewish identity and the leftist identity always wins out. That is how they think, and that is how they recruit. They recruit people who are lost. They recruit people who do religious adherence in the United States is at an all-time low. And people need these things. People need something to believe in, and they are being recruited by people. They're saying, listen, I have this Jewish identity. I've been told, like you said, I've been told since I was a kid that I'm Jewish, regardless of whether that's true or not. I have no connection with this. These people who I'm friends with on my college campus are telling me that I'm with them. I'm part of a marginalized group. There's nothing better than being a victim. I'm part of a marginalized group. Otherwise I'm just a white kid. Who wants to be that? So it absolutely is very appealing to young people. And then they get brought on, if not now started, by bringing people on birthright trips and then getting them to get off of birthright trips, to pull them away and say, they're not showing you the real Israel. The real Israel is here. It's here in Gaza. The real Israel is here in Ramallah. The real Israel is wherever we find poor, impoverished Palestinian people. That's where the real Israel is. And the only reason that they're poor and impoverished is because of Israel, not because that they voted in Fatah and Hamas, not because Abbas is on the 16th year of his 4-year term, not because they were under the auspices of Yasser Arafat for 4 decades. None of that. It's all because of the Jews over here who are just trying to live their lives. It is really, it's just shanda. I mean, there's no other word for it.
You know, we had an incident here. Every single day there's an incident. Every single hour there's an incident. But this particular one, University of Toronto, and University of Toronto, they have what is called Hart House, and Hart House is like world famous for debates, legitimate debates, and so they had a debate last week. So who'd they invite? 3 people for the debate. This is how screwed up things are on university campus now with the whole woke and BDS and intimidation. And, Jews have no voice on campus, and anti-Semitism is so prevalent. 3 people are invited to participate in this debate. 3 BDS advocates. One advocate publicly states on their social media that during the fighting with Gaza last May, that they stuck onto homes throughout Canada mock eviction notices. Now, a lot of people from the Jewish community called the police, the authorities, saying that they received these mock eviction notices. So this is one organization that was invited, one leader of an organization, BDS group, invited to participate in the quote unquote debate. And the other 2 were BDS leaders as well. There's no debate taking place and nobody says anything either. There's also an event going on. Like, we talk about the Anti-Defamation League. We have an organization representing Canadian Jewry, the largest Jewish advocates group, called CJA. And they're having an event on anti-Semitism on the 15th of this month. And they invited as their keynote speaker, Ahmed Hassan, who's a member of parliament for the Liberal Party of Canada, the government of Canada. And he sent out a tweet. Forced evictions, expansions of settlements are impediments to a two-state solution and lasting peace. He's against Jews living in East Jerusalem, what they call East Jerusalem. Now, that's the official mainstream Jewish organization inviting him as the keynote speaker. And, NGO Monitor, they're on record, the most recognized research organization that represents Israel, to advocate and give the correct information out about what's going on with the Supreme Court of Israel, rulings with regards to Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, other neighborhoods, settlements, housing, BDS groups, who they all are. They state the facts. And I sent out a mass email blitz with the facts. Why is CEJA promoting a member of parliament to be the keynote speaker at their event on anti-Semitism when this is what he is advocating, essentially the talking points of the BDS? This is probably new to you, Moise, because you're in the States, but I'm sure you could relate to this because you've written about the ADL in the States. What do you got to
Yes,
say?
absolutely. There's also, it also reminds me of the debates at Oxford.
Right.
I believe it was Oxford, that at least they had the good faith to invite someone like Dennis Prager over. And when they brought him in, he completely demolished them. I mean, they have zero talking points, and I would be surprised if anyone from the BDS side, the If Not Now side, the JC side, would go on a debate with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. It would be insane. It would be as one-sided as any fight you've ever seen, because they have nothing. All they have are woke ideology. They don't have any facts behind them. They couldn't name you any of the atrocities that they claim that Israel is a part of. They wouldn't be able to do it. So obviously, if they were going to have a debate, they would have to have multiple people who all have the same opinion that Israel is evil, Israel is bad, Israel will only be a free and just society if from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And you could still call it Israel, but just give millions and millions of people who want to destroy the state and kill everyone there citizenship, and then you'll be fine. They don't want it. They claim they want a two-state solution. They do not want a two-state solution. If they want a two-state solution, if any of them wanted a two-state solution, they could have had one many, many times. They don't want it. It is the biggest lie in the conflict.
Right. There's a retired general from Israel that's going on the speaking circuit, and he's making presentations to a lot of different Jewish groups right now. And he's, I heard his presentation the other night, and he says, essentially what you just said there, that is just they don't come up with solutions. They're interested in just the talking point, and their talking point is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And what we should do is just we're more into solutions. And he says we shouldn't be into that. We could be then into that later on, but what we have to do, we have to highlight a basic message. And that basic message is, we're Jews, the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. End of story. That's it. Well, I see we have Howie Silberger with us from Montreal. Howie, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Good to have you with us. Join the discussion of what we're essentially talking about.
We have a major problem in the Jewish community. It's a huge problem. The problem is that we're not following Judaism. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a bunch of who claim to be religious, who claim to be modern Orthodox. I'll put modern in marks. Modern Orthodox, who are very woke. So suddenly, Torah values and the values of the religion, the values of Judaism, kind of take a backseat to wokeness. So you have modern Orthodox synagogues, rabbis who go out and do gay marriages, right? Which is totally against Jewish tradition, Jewish law. But they do it because they don't want to insult anyone. They don't want to hurt anyone. They don't want anybody to feel bad. And to me that's a big problem. There's a big problem in Judaism when we decide to scale back on our value system in order to kind of, I don't know, make society happy. Look, Judaism religion, we have our set of rules, and some of the rules are pretty harsh. And okay, fine, that's what we have to do. If we accept Judaism, we accept Torah, we accept the rules. And to kind of bend like this and to kind of twist and turn and try to make everything fit within
Right.
the rules doesn't really sit well with me.
And
that's
you have
really
in Montreal, you have the high-ranking members of CIJA in Montreal as well, and one of them is Rabbi Popko, but he did some programs together with Islamic Canada, and Islamic Relief Canada embraces the BDS. They advocate Palestine. That just, like, why would Jewish leaders, CIJA, have anything to do with a group like Islamic Relief Canada? I mean, Islamic Relief Canada, not only do they advocate that, but the organization Islamic Relief Worldwide, and I'm not saying they're the same thing, but Islamic Relief Worldwide, Israel has designated that group as not good at all. So why would Rabbi Putko? He's going to help them with a charity event and so on and so forth. And it just seems that it makes it more palatable for the Jewish community that if I'm, as a leader, going to take the step and work with and embrace this organization that embraces the BDS, then it just makes it that much more of a descent for members of the Jewish community and more easy for them to say, why not? You see that happening?
About 25 years ago, I was invited to the first interfaith meeting when the rabbis and the priests and the imams all got together to talk interfaith discussions. And they invited me to come to the meeting because I was a young activist on campus and they wanted the youth involved. And because I was very active on campus fighting anti-Jewism on campus, they wanted me to be involved in this. And I looked at the rabbi who invited me to come to this. I have to have been Rabbi Popko 5 years ago. And I looked at him, I said to him, why would I want to be part of this? Why would I want to sit at a table with people who are advocating the destruction of my religion, destruction of my people? So you had Christian priests sitting there whose sole purpose is to save people, convert people to Christianity so they can be saved and go to heaven. You have imams sitting there who support Hamas and you want me to go and simple? I absolutely refuse to go. And the answer I got when I questioned why would you want me to do this, the answer I got because we have to get along with our neighbors. So we don't sit with our enemies to talk. We don't sit with our friends to talk. Excuse me. We sit with our enemies to talk. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I still think it's ridiculous to have these interfaith discussions. They don't lead anywhere. It doesn't stop anti-Jewism. It doesn't stop anything. All it does is show that we are weak. And we are weak people who need the affirmation and the pat on the back from everybody else to justify our existence. I think we could.
I think it would be kind of interesting. I think it would be kind of interesting if these Islamic organizations were like, for instance, there was I just saw this Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. He uploaded onto Facebook a video where he was in, I think, the United Arab Emirates, either there or he was in Bahrain. And they opened up just over, I think, half a year ago, a Holocaust museum there. So he was showing this on his video. Now, if these Islamic groups in Canada, and I'll cite them like Islamic Relief Canada, the Muslim Organization of Canada, Muslim Association of Canada, and various all of them, if they were saying, we believe in the Abraham Accords, we recognize Israel, we want to get along, we want peace, let's talk about it. That might be a different scenario, what you're talking about, Howie, but that doesn't happen. Not here. I think we have a little clip. We'll show maybe a couple minutes of Rabbi Shmuley Bateach when he was there in United Arab Emirates at the museum.
Go.
Here we go.
I've been watching. It's such an honor to be here with my very dear friend Ahmed, who runs the Museum Crossroads of Civilization. This is the only permanent Holocaust exhibition and gallery in the Arab Middle East, and it's such a sign of respect for the martyred 6 million of the Holocaust that this was created beginning in March of last year. We've just arrived. It's just astonishing, the artifacts. Some of the pictures, the photographs are so painful. They actually have to be covered because many children come here and the teachers have to elect whether to show them or not. Mass graves at Bergen-Belsen and Buchenwald, thousands of bodies strewn about. And the Holocaust was a European phenomenon, but so to have it commemorated here by our Muslim brothers and sisters here in the United Arab Emirates in general, Dubai in particular, is such an honor. And we're watching this live now so people can see what's been achieved here. This is arguably the most famous picture of the Holocaust, the boy being arrested in the War Ghetto. What you've done with this is incredible.
Here we have, for this gallery, we have she's from Israel actually. She works with us here, her name is Halevi. And the people who built this place, they are Muslims, Christians, and Arabs. So, and people from Pakistan, from Philippines, and from here, and they work together. And we have an artist also, he was an Israeli artist called Ben Sirus. He's the one who suggested this idea. And so as an artist, did a great job. And we want it, it's a small place. It doesn't have to be quantity, it's about the quality.
Oh, quality is,
It's like a project.
it's a big place. It has phenomenal impact.
We are showing them from the beginning of the narratives.
Moish, could you imagine the optics if the ADL and the American Muslims for Palestine, that they were at the Holocaust Museum talking in such a fashion?
It's truly incredible. We cannot underestimate the historic nature of the Abraham Accords. I feel like they got swept under the rug because they happened under Trump, first of all, so no one really wants to talk about it, at least not in American press. And they happened during COVID, and so you were able to just say, "Oh, what's the big deal?" Whatever. The historic nature of three, and I think that if Trump was reelected, it would have been much more, far more. Arab nations signing peace agreements with Israel for the first time in over 25 years. This happened, and you're seeing videos coming out of the UAE, out of these large cities where they're playing Hatikva, where they're raising the Israeli flag, and it is absolutely incredible that these Arab nations see the value of a Jewish state when American Jews, Canadian Jews on campuses, British Jews many times don't. They don't see the value of a Jewish state. They don't see why we need it. And it's actually very odd. There was a group, I'm blanking on the name right now, a Christian group that creates a report every single year of where Christians are basically being persecuted around the world. And these are the countries where Christians are in trouble, all this kind of stuff. And my first thought was, there are so many Christian countries, like not just America, that's like, there are a lot of Christians here, but like Christians that are official Christian countries. And they don't do anything about this. And if a Jew is in trouble around the world, Israel drops everything and makes sure that that Jew is safe. Like that has been the creed of the Jewish state. That happened in the 70s in Black September, and they went to and they took care of the Jews in Operation Moses, and they brought them the Ethiopian Jews. They just drop everything and make sure all the Jews are okay, and that is something that literally no one else, no other religion has. The Muslim Uyghurs in China, there are 47 Muslim countries. Why aren't they saying anything? They don't say anything. Jewish state says something. Everyone recognizes it except for the Jews, except for the non-religious Jews, the leftist Jews.
Right, which is it's unbelievable. And somehow from that mix of the leftists, the Tema Smiths get hired by the ADL to do their advocacy and to spread their poison.
Yeah, would they ever hire someone like now obviously Shmuley Boteach has enough to do, but would they ever hire someone of his ilk? Would they ever hire someone like you? Would they ever hire someone like Jesse? Would they ever hire someone who says the Jewish people deserve to be in the land of Israel, that the Jewish people are part of the land of Israel, it's inherent in our nature, in our community, in our nationality? To do Jewish outreach?
Right.
They never would. They wouldn't even consider it.
And I think the big difference, this has been a long time coming. This goes all the way back to Netanyahu and Moore in the 40s and the 50s, talking about Israel and Arab states having solidarity. And the reason this hasn't happened for so long, I think, is also on us, is that the Jews for so long acted like colonizers in their own land, and like we're going to be a little New York in the Middle East, or a little America. We're going to be the 51st state in the Middle East. And I think only very recently are we starting to get away from that. So we're not going to be the 51st state in the Middle East. We're going to be the Jewish state in the Middle East, just like we were 2,000 years ago. And I think the Arabs are finally starting to say, oh, for so many years, you guys were kind of acting like European colonizers, and we saw you like that. But now that you guys are starting to reorient yourself to this region, to how you act in this land, we recognize you. We remember you guys. And we are willing to have that national, almost families, the Abraham Accords, familial solidarity that we once did.
Jesse,
So,
I think that goes to the whole idea that Jews always felt guilty that we would be as bad as the Nazis. So we're going to Israel, and they bought into this whole propaganda story that was sold, that the so-called Palestinians were there before the Jewish people, and that the Jews coming in were occupying their land, and if we threw them out of the land, or we did anything to them, that was exactly what the Nazis did to Judaism. They don't want to be compared to the Nazis. So a whole generation of Israeli leaders were afraid of being labeled Nazis, where they should have just said, "Hey, we're Jews. This is our land. Get lost." I mean, that's really what should have happened, but that's not what happened, because they were afraid. Once again, world opinion. They were afraid of world opinion.
And I think that also there was also a general mentality for many years until the mid 2000s of appeasement will get us peace. Appeasement will lead to peace. So when Ehud Barak offered 92% of Judea and Samaria to Yasser Arafat, when Ehud Omer offered 95% of the same area to Mahmoud Abbas, they thought, we'll trade land for peace. I think that the Netanyahu era, the people of Israel finally learned the only way to live is in security. And I think that kind of respect, that gave them the respect of their Arab neighbors, because they were looking weak from that perspective, from the perspective of, all right, we'll just give you. And if there's anything that region of the world respects, it's strength. And so when they started saying, fine, forget it, we're just going to build a wall over here, we're going to build a fence over here, like, that's it, we're going to have the Iron Dome. If you shoot rockets at us, we will destroy those rockets, and then we're going to come in and get you. Like, that's it. And that is a strength that the Arab neighbors respect. There is a certain respect of that, combined with the fact that, honestly, the Arabs are sick of the Palestinian complaining, taking all the PR capital in the world and putting it into terror tunnels and rockets. And they're worried about Iran. I mean, there was a lot of factors that went into those Abraham Accords. And honestly, I think it's long past due.
I think it's very funny all the times where the Hezbollah organizations trot out examples of when Israel has tried to barter land as if it makes the argument stronger, when it makes it so much weaker, because that's not how people act in their own land. People don't treat their own land like it's a trinket to be bought and sold for peace or whatever. People act in their own land like it's if I forget Jerusalem, I'll forget my right hand. My right hand is not up for sale, and if I'm acting like it's up for sale, it's probably not my right hand, or people would think it's not my right hand. And that's what the Arabs have thought. They've looked at us, and the world looked at us and said, "You're willing to negotiate? We don't buy you. We don't buy you at all." And now that we're standing steadfast to our convictions, they're starting to recognize us for who we are. That's a very powerful thing.
It is powerful, and that is the most powerful thing, that we have to internalize that and just be proud of. This is our heritage, this is our claim, this is who we are, and this is our land. And end of story.
This is a religious war too. It's not even a land war. If it was a land war, it'd be finished a long time ago.
Right.
We have to understand that this is a religious war.
Yeah.
And the religious war stems from the Muslim belief that any land that was ever a caliphate can't be occupied by anybody else. So because the Ottoman Empire was a caliphate and it occupied the land that is Israel, the Muslims believe that they can't be occupied by anyone else. That's why they could offer 93%, 92%, 98%, 150%. They're going to walk away from the table because they can never accept a Jewish state. The state of Israel was very smart when they made these deals, saying, "Hey, we'll give you whatever you want. You have to recognize us as a Jewish state." By saying that, the Arabs had to walk away. They had no choice. Religiously, they had no choice.
There's certainly Muslims that believe that, and there's certainly Muslims that don't. We know the Emiratis don't believe that, the Bahrainis don't believe that, and we know that Hamas does, which is why it's very important we make the distinctions. It says in the Talmud Yerushalmi that when Yeshua came to this land, he said, those who want to make peace, which entails something very specific in terms of following the Noahide laws, which includes accepting the law and order, paying taxes, and community service. If you want to make peace, make peace. If you want to leave, leave. And if you want to fight, fight. And if you want to fight, we'll kill you. And that's the deal that, we try to get so creative, and we try to reinvent the wheel, binational state, 2-state solution, 3-state solution, whatever it might be. When the answer is right there, this isn't our first rodeo. This isn't like it's our first time being a state in their land, not by a long shot. And we have a roadmap, and we have a way, we have a derech, and it's time we embrace it instead of pretending we're anything else, because we're not.
Right. Yeah. 100%. That's right on.
Yeah, and I was in Gaza in 2005. Happened to be the year I was in Israel after high school. And I remember we all went to the protest so they wouldn't give it back. They wouldn't, unilaterally withdraw from Gaza. And even as a 19-year-old, I could see that it wasn't going to work out. I was looking around and I'm like, what are they doing? What are they thinking? And it was that kind of action when I'm sure that when the Arab nations saw Israeli soldiers physically pulling Israeli citizens out of their homes to give the land back to the Palestinians who are there, who immediately turned around and elected Hamas as their governing body, they must have said, they're going to be destroyed. They're going to be wiped off the map. They're going to be wiped off the map. The Palestinians are going to win, and the Hamas is going to win. They're not strong enough to even though we've seen them win in 48, 57, 60, 54, 50, 67, 73. We've seen them win over and over and over again. They've changed, but it took some time, and we've learned the lesson, I think, from 2005. Or Israel has learned a lesson from 2005, and now the Arabs who have joined the accords have seen that as well, have seen that change as well.
It's really, I think that whole episode was really a bastardization of Jabotinsky's iron wall philosophy, where we're going to put an iron wall in between our enemies, and that could be a good idea. But what if it's in your own land? You can't put an iron wall in your own land. And I think the people of Israel are beginning to recognize that when you transgress Torah, when the Torah says that you make a state in all of Eretz Israel, and you transgress that, there are natural consequences. When you pull out of South Lebanon in 2000, you get Hezbollah. When you pull out of Gaza, you get Hamas. When you abdicate your responsibility to the land, that responsibility doesn't go away. Other people, less equipped people, evil people are going to fill that responsibility. And it's not going to be very fun when it does happen. And until we fix it, it's going to continue with the same thing.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And it comes right back again to that very root that we have, Jews have to assert themselves and say, I'm a Jew. The land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. End of discussion. That's it. Oh, you want to destroy Israel? Get out. And that's it. It's as basic as that. Oh, you don't really like Israel, but you're not going to do anything. You just want to work. Mutter a little bit to yourself. Okay. But it's our land. That's it. And anyone who advocates the anti-Semitic slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, you can't give any support from the Jewish community for any organizations that attach themselves to that. That is anti-Semitism. It's the epitome of anti-Semitism. It fits in with the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, and the definition of racism should, by the Anti-Defamation League, should include and promote the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. We can't have anything to do with any organizations that are against that IRA definition of anti-Semitism as a starting point. And that's just it. That's just the way the way it's going. So when CJ invites a member of parliament who advocates against Jews living in East Jerusalem, that's a talking point by the BDS. That's giving legitimacy. There's another BDS guy. He calls himself a rabbi. Yeah,
I think there's a common thread throughout all the things we've talked about today, and that's these things are not grassroots movement. There's no grassroots Jewish movement demanding interfaith events or gay marriage or a two-state solution or to be represented by people that don't like us very much. What this is it's coming from the top down. It's coming from collaborators with the powers that be, the establishment, the global establishment, that are taking these justified Jewish instincts and diverting them. Oh, you want Torah? Gay marriage. Oh, you want to fight anti-Semitism? Be represented, accept representation by people that don't have your best interests at heart, to put it lightly. You think Israel should be doing more? Two-state solution. Have them sell the land, basically create two states that are dependent on the United States. It's a diversion.
When you look at a map of the Middle East and you see tiny Israel there, and it's essentially the size of the United States, maybe bigger, and little tiny Israel, and then you get Jews saying, yeah, two states, let's divide it up. Well, they're going to be happy with that? I mean, look at there is no claim against Israel other than there should be, other than what they're saying really is that it's part of Islamic conquest of the entire Middle East, and anyone that is not part of Islam has no right to have sovereignty in the Middle East. That's what they're saying, and therefore, just say no.
There's no Arabs that want two states, and there's no Jews that want two states. So who does? It's the global establishment that want two dependent states that are weak states that are dependent on the U.S. and the global establishment for security from now until forever. And that's not something we could live with. Even if it is secure, that's not something we can live with. It's not going to be secure, but it's not something we can't be the 50th state.
What's the advantage of that, Jesse? Why would they want a two-state solution? I don't understand why the global establishment would be pushing for this. Where's the advantage for them? Where do they come up winning here?
They want global control. They want global cultural control. They want to have two states because if there's two states, they're both going to be weak. They're not going to be able to succeed. And they're going to have to rely on the U.S. for foreign aid, for military support, for cultural support.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that foreign aid for a moment. So the U.S. foreign aid to Israel is a little bit more than $3 billion annually. And now the GDP in Israel is, well, last year anyways, it exceeded $450 billion. And they say it's going to be this year coming forward, 2022, it's going to exceed $500 billion. So, $3 billion in aid, and it's not free money or anything like that. It's invested into Israeli technology and Israeli ability to enhance security technologies, weapon technologies.
70 by
Indeed,
law,
Israel-
70.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm. Go ahead.
sorry, by law, 75% of that foreign aid has to be spent in the United States.
Right.
On weapon technology. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, in
it's
1993,
not even 10% of the GDP of Israel. It's like, what is 3 billion of 450 billion? That's not even 1%.
1%.
So Israel's not really. You had actually the former ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, that says maybe it's time that Israel just says, after what happened with the Iron Dome debate in Congress about funding, he said maybe it's about time that Israel just weans off any of the foreign aid, because it's not a blank check anyways. It isn't, and
Mayor,
it's not
Michael Oren wasn't the first one to say that. In
What's that?
1993, and Michael Oren wasn't the first one to say that. In 1993,
Okay.
Deputy Foreign Minister of the State of Israel
Mhm.
going to Montreal at the CJA plenary in Montreal. He
Yep.
he spoke there, and he said clearly, he says, look, the GDP of Israel doesn't need foreign assistance. We don't need help. That was way back in 93. He says we don't
Mhm.
need help. We don't
Mhm.
want you. Stop donating to Jewish National Fund. Stop giving us money. We could survive on our own. And that way we don't have to rely on everybody else's foreign policy in order to run our country. That was Yossi
Right.
Beilin in 1993. We're so many years, we're still
I
here.
remember that. Yes, I
Jonathan
remember that.
Pollard just said as much. He said U.S. aid is like a heroin addiction, where we get this aid and it inhibits us for having our own policy because it gives the U.S. a foothold into our policy, and it inhibits us from making our own manufacturing of weapons.
It's like U.S.
It
welfare.
was happening
internally.
at one time, but now when it's over 450 billion in GDP, it represents nothing. So there's no leverage. In fact, Obama in his presidency was very upset that Israel is becoming too strong, in his opinion, too self-reliant, in his opinion. And in terms of like the technology where Israel is so advanced and offering and selling, and we didn't even tap into the natural gas that Israel's going to be exporting in a large scale. What that will amount to, it's unbelievable. They talk about the trade also with I think it was the United Arab Emirates, where their foreign minister was estimating, I think it was several months ago, he made the statement that the foreign aid deal with the trade deal with Israel is going to be in the billions annually. So, when you talk about the threat of the U.S., there is no threat anymore in that regard. And when it comes also, here's another interesting, just the past week it was in the media, Israeli media, that Israel is going to be putting an end soon to the Iron Dome, because they have now a system. It's going to be operational in about a year, maybe a little more than that, a laser defense system, which is going to cost pennies to shoot down in rapid succession, missiles, anything they want to throw at Israel. In other words, it costs money, the Iron Dome. To shoot down any missile costs quite a bit. But with the laser technology, it won't. It will be pennies. So, I don't see this. So according to Michael Oren, he said Israel should just siphon off the foreign aid, because there's no threat anymore. At one time there was. There isn't anymore. I remember when there was a loan guarantees under, maybe Moish, you remember this. George Bush Sr. when
Never
Israel
fell
needed
for.
loan guarantees and from the United States, and they were talking about withholding loan guarantees to Israel. Those days are over. There's billionaires living in Israel.
Yeah, it's a completely different scenario over there. The Israel startup nation is a wonderful descriptor of what Israel has become. I remember a few years back when they discovered oil in part of the Mediterranean Sea. The reaction was, well, now Israel really does have everything. It is the land flowing with milk and honey. It is the land that keeps on giving. And you know what? That's why everyone is jealous of. And the second the Jews don't control it anymore, the land will die. That is just the way it's been. Everyone knows the old Mark Twain descriptor of the land of Palestine, as it was known, of it being a desolate place, a mud-ridden place, and all that kind of thing. The Jews come back, boom, that's it.
So, I mean, the foreign aid that we're talking about goes all the way back to the Rogers Plan in 1970 in the War of Attrition against Egypt, where under Nixon, the U.S. came to Israel and said, stand down, sacrifice military readiness and decision-making independence, and we'll give you funding and weapons. Because right now we're saying that America is more dependent on Israel than Israel is on America. We don't have to make that choice anymore. We could have sovereignty in our decisions. We could have military readiness and still say to the U.S., you want us to invest in your economy? You want us to test your technology? Then let us make our own decisions and let us be as prepared as we need to be.
Yeah, 100%. That's right. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. Listen, we've been at it for about about an hour and 20 minutes. Let's wrap it up. We covered a lot. So let's have some final closing remarks from everyone, and we'll have a show again next week. But Moish, give us a closing remark. It was nice to have you on.
Thank you very much. I think the most important thing that an average Jewish person needs to do these days is be informed. It is at this point, it's unacceptable for any student coming out of high school, going into college, out of a Jewish high school, not know what If Not Now is, what Jewish Voice for Peace is, what J Street is. This is essential education for every single yeshiva or student in America and Canada. They must know, because if it is so simple to be lured into these kind of talking points, lured into these kind of ideals, and all of a sudden you turn around and you find yourself on the wrong side of peace, of love, of everything that we have been trying to build for the past since well before I was born. So I think it is education and understanding of these groups, and unfortunately the ADL is part of them now, is really essential.
Boyce, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much also for exposing the ADL. That was big.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent. Howie, closing remarks.
I think we have to remember that we're Jewish. I think that we have to remember that we are Jews. Jewish leads to a certain responsibility, and the responsibility is to our values, to Jewish values, Torah values, and to look at, if God wanted us to be the same as the rest of the world, He would have given us the Torah and the lifestyle that we have to live based on. So we have to start accepting the fact that we are different from everyone else, and that woke society could do whatever the heck they want. We don't have to follow them. We have to follow our own paths. That's the direction we were pointed in by God, and that's the direction we have to continue going in. And by bending and trying to accommodate and trying to welcome everyone and not insult anybody. We're just doing a disservice to Judaism.
Mhm.
Another thing, Mayor, I know we didn't talk about this, but another thing I just want to say it while I have the opportunity is that I don't understand for the life of me why every Jewish school around the world doesn't have martial arts being taught in the schools. It doesn't
Bingo.
make any
Right.
it's totally mind-boggling that this is not happening in every school across the world.
Mhm.
Jews are being attacked everywhere. Why are we allowing our kids to grow up how to defend themselves? I don't get it, and for the life of me, nobody's been able to explain it to me. So every time I ask this question, nobody has been able to explain to me why there isn't, if the federations of the world and the combined Jewish appeals of the world are so concerned about Jewish safety, why not do the basics of Jewish safety and teach them how to defend themselves? It's just ridiculous that we're not.
You're absolutely bang on, 100%. 100%. Especially during last May when Jews were being attacked in every city. You know what? I know what was happening in Toronto. I know what was happening in New York and other cities in the States, but there was a lot happening in Montreal. What was going on in Montreal in May in terms of attacks?
Aside from synagogue desecrations, which happen all the time in Montreal, but the local federation covers them up. So what happens is the synagogue will get desecrated, and nobody will know about it because the nations won't publicize it. And if
We got a mic problem.
You cut out for you too.
It was good. I was looking forward to hearing what he was saying, but the mic just stopped on him. Howie, are you there?
do you hear me now?
I can hear
We
you
seem
now.
to have
Yeah.
frozen here.
Yeah.
We froze a little bit here. Sorry for that. The federations hide the fact that we've been attacked. So anytime we have a Jewish attack, they hide that fact. And then when I get on my radio show and I expose it and I say synagogue was desecrated, if you live near the synagogue, look out and see if anything strange is happening in the neighborhood. If you see something, call the police. I get lambasted by the community.
Mhm.
How could you do that? You're scaring the community. Be a little scared. I think fear is a good thing, and I don't think that babying the community and allowing attacks to happen on people and on buildings and on our institutions, and not telling people to look out and be vigilant and watch out and let's be our own neighborhood watch because the police sure the heck aren't doing it. I don't think that I don't think it's doing a service to the community. Let me give you an example, Mayor. During the COVID lockdown, we had a COVID lockdown just a couple of weeks ago. They shut us down. They shut down all the schools and everything was shut down for a few weeks. There were certain schools in the city that didn't follow the rules to the letter of the law. So they had religious studies and they had all sorts of stuff going on. Some of the yeshivas.
Mhm.
One of the news crews of big media company, one of the news crews broke into a yeshiva and recorded the kids learning in the classroom, and published it and aired it on their newscast that night. So naturally, what happened was the next day, some idiot showed up at that same yeshiva and tried to break in with a baseball bat. Now, this wasn't reported on the media. The media didn't report this. Nobody knew about this except for the people at the yeshiva and the police who showed up to get rid of this guy. But the fact is that when the media focuses, and there's one particularly Jewish reporter in Montreal who only goes after religious organizations when we have COVID lockdowns or anything that he could expose them on, and he used the word expose. He only goes after these people. So one of these Jewish, I hate to use the word capos, but I mean when the shoe fits, right? Goes after Jewish organizations and tries to make them look, especially Orthodox Jewish organizations. And what happens is the neighborhood who doesn't particularly like the fact that these people are there anyway. You get the radicals in the neighborhood, the crazies in the neighborhood who get up and start knocking their hats off, pulling their tzitzis, lighting them on fire, whatever. I mean, these kind of attacks that happened over the last couple of months since the beginning of COVID. And the mayor of New York, we know the mayor of New York blamed the COVID spread in New York on the Jews davening outside of the Jews praying outside of 770. So when these things happen, the the public is listening, and when the public is listening, people who feel that they are a little above the law feel that they could react, and by reacting meaning attacking Jewish institutions, Jewish people, which is essentially goes back to my first point: is why we're not defending ourselves and teaching people how to defend themselves,
Right.
because we know what happens. It's a constant trend. It's a constant trend. It's not a new phenomenon.
Right.
So in Montreal, what's happening is people are being attacked, institutions are being attacked. We're building fortresses. Our synagogues are turning into fortresses with armed security guards and kept away and extra patrols, and those bollards that you put in front of the doors and the arms, the electric arms to close off the parking lots. And we're turning ourselves into fortresses. So instead of saying, "Hey, we're not scared of you, you Jew hater. We're going to fight back, and if you come bother us, we're going to knock you on your ass." We're saying, "Okay, we're hiding in our fortresses. We are afraid, we are weak, and we are sitting ducks. So please come and attack us." That's basically what we're saying. And to me, it's disgusting. It's despicable, and this is not the way the Jewish community should be run.
100%. Yes. Jesse, closing remarks.
Well, I said to you earlier over the phone, but the people that have taken the black pill are pessimists. I think really lack the perspective of the last 50 years, 30 years, even 10 years. But that being said, we do have to recognize that there's an entire apparatus that exists merely to pacify and divert the good instincts of Jews, especially Jewish youth, away from where they should be into something foreign. Antonio Gramsci, who's considered the father of cultural Marxism, wanted to create a society, a global society, where every facet, every sports game, every movie on television, every song on the radio, every institution of government, every lesson in school is meant to further class consciousness. What we need is a Jewish hegemony, where every sporting event, every song on the radio, every lesson in school, every government institution is all centered and all moving towards the furtherment of Jewish consciousness. That's the solution.
I like that. We need backbone, and the backbone comes from
always on offense. Always on offense.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, thank you everyone for joining us. This was an important show. Also, whoever is watching, if you could please share this on your social media platforms. Appreciate it. We want to get the word out there. And thank you very much. Stand up for the truth. Stand up for Israel. Stand up for being Jewish. Be proud of being Jewish, and never back down. I believe we have a song to end, like we do every show.
We'll have a song to end. I just wanted to just quickly, for a lot of young Jews, really still question whether we are race. This isn't a joke. This is serious, particularly after Whoopi's thing, and then there's these stupid debates going on. So I just wanted to put this on the screen, and I'll read it as a closing before we put some music on.
Okay.
Here's the situation. It's a small print, so I can actually read it out loud. So this is race defined biologically, socially, and demographically. Scientists define race as a population which differs from other populations in regards to the frequency of genes it possesses. So Judaism is a race. Ethnologists and anthropologists use the term race to describe the subcategories of racial groupings, including genetics, history, traditions, and language. In these contexts, Judaism is a race. When someone explores their 23andMe, those with Jewish ancestry have commonalities in our DNA, distinguishable from non-Jews. This is because our genetic composition dates back thousands of years, so therefore Judaism is a race. 2,500 years ago, before we were exiled from our homeland, we were one large community of a shared language, culture, traditions, rituals, and genetic map. Thus, Judaism is a race. When the Jewish race was forced to disperse, most Jews settled in the Middle East and Mediterranean countries, and later throughout Europe. We remained the same Jewish race genetically, but were dispersed geographically. We adopted and adapted the languages and traditions of our new neighbors, but we maintained our culture and gene pool, often under the threat of death. Then we were evicted from Spain 800 years ago, blamed for the Black Plague 650 years ago, subjected to the Cossack sabers 150 years ago, and between the 1930s and 1950s, 259,000 Jews were banished from Morocco, 140,000 Jews from Algeria, 100,000 from Tunisia, 75,000 from Egypt, 38,000 from Libya, 135,000 from Iraq, 55,000 from Yemen, 34,000 from Turkey, 20,000 from Lebanon, and 18,000 from Syria, 25,000 from Iran. We endured communist oppression, narrowly survived Nazi aggression, all because of our race. We owe it to those who perished and those who survived to proudly carry on the genes, languages, customs, and traditions of the Jewish race. So you'll get in a couple last words while I bring up Al. I think we'll do Hatikva from the IDF as a good way to close this particular program. You'll know
Good.
when it's playing because it'll be playing.
Excellent. Well, the song will come on in a moment. It's a tikva. Everybody pay attention to it. It's the song of Israel.
נפש יהודית